All right, we're going to move along. Okay. So something that's going on in our world is that there's inequality, right? And so it's not given that one man should possess that which is above another, wherefore the whole world lieth in sin. This is a scripture from the Doctrine and Covenants. And so people, and the Lord has said that we should all deal honestly and all be alike among this people and receive alike, that we may be one even as the Lord has commanded us. But our next speaker is going to address this issue. When the world, these problems are really clear in the world, obviously, and so the world has solutions to these problems of inequality, and they have the world in Babylon, I'd say, has the way of creating equality, and it hasn't turned out very pretty. And so our next speaker has spent a lot of time studying historically some of these attempts to cause or to make equality among men. Julie Behling, she, yay for Julie. She went on a mission to Russia. Well, first of all, she's a homeschool mom and also just an awesome person. I've known her since she was born. We're cousins. And she went on a mission to Russia. And then she came back and she went to graduate school studying Russian language and literature and history. And she got a double master's degree. And then she, for her thesis, she was studying the underground Christian movement in the Soviet Union and how they could just survive with the control mechanism of the Soviet Union and all the tactics the Soviet state was using to try to destroy Christianity. And then she started noticing after she did this research that she started seeing these same tactics happening in America. And so that prompted her to write a book, and it took like 18 years to write this book. Is that right? Sort of. She had to take a break, having kids and such. But it took a long time. This book was well researched. It's called Beneath Sheep's Clothing. And then later she produced that into a documentary called Beneath Sheep's Clothing.
So good.
Yes, it's excellent documentary. And so she continues to focus her efforts on trying to get the woke ideology out of our schools and to wake people up to the situation that's going on right now. And so, welcome to the stage. Here we go. So random. Here you go. Go ahead.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for pronouncing my last name right. She's known me since I was born, so it's pretty easy for her. So thank you guys so much for having me, and thanks to Jacob for organizing this event, for all the people who've already spoken. Really some thought-provoking speeches and presentations. So today my presentation is on Marxism, past and present, and unfortunately how we can overcome the woke left, woke right catalyst for revolution. And but we're going to first go into some history. But right now, I want you to imagine a nation or a group of people, a group of wounded people. Let's say a nation of wounded people that are culturally, politically radicalized. Everywhere you look, there's propaganda and spin. It's hard to get genuine information. And society is deeply split into two factions. Can anyone imagine this type of scenario? Sound familiar? So it's pretty much what we're dealing with right now, obviously. And a society like this is going to have a really hard time becoming a Zion society, because everywhere you look, and this is like, you just turn on the news and someone mentioned this. Actually, Jacob, in your presentation, where is Jacob? Talking about, you watch news on the right, and then you will get a lot of mockery of leftists. If you watch the leftist news, you'll get a lot of mockery of, MAGA people. And so there's just a lot of mockery on all hands and not enough understanding of where people are coming from. And I'm hoping that we can come to a better understanding of not only the different sides, but the ways in which all of us can be controlled and how we can overcome that. So a little bit more about me. Like Sharon said, I served a mission in Russia. I was in the Russia Samara mission when there was 2 elders that were kidnapped and held for ransom. I was my district leader and his companion at the time. And so so when people like post on social media, oh, tell something about yourself that no one would believe. I'm like, oh, I was interrogated by the KGB one time. I'm like, oh. It was a former KGB, but about the kidnapping of my district leader. So that was an interesting experience. Very crazy experience overall. And I was able to go back a couple of times, but this picture is when I was there in graduate school for my study abroad, and I was back doing research for my thesis. And I was meeting with people from different Christian faiths who had been some of the holdouts during the Soviet era, the strong holdouts. In fact, Russia can thank those people and the people who came before them in those different churches, those dissident churches, for the resurgence of faith in Russia, because these people kept the flame going. And so I was really privileged to be able to meet with some of those individuals there, and that was in 2002. And Sharon already told the story of my graduate work and my thesis on underground Christian movements, and then my book, Beneath Sheep's Clothing, and which miraculously was able to be made into a documentary. Too many miracles to talk about there, but Beneath Sheep's Clothing movie, you can watch it online. I have 2 DVDs left, sold out otherwise, but I brought the 2 last DVDs with me if anyone wants to grab one. Thank you. So what is Marxism? Raise your hand if you've ever looked into Marxism and communism at all. I'm guessing a lot of people in here. People have different definitions of Marxism and communism. My definition of Marxism is the playbook to prepare a society to fall to communism. And it goes through an oppressed versus oppressor framework that Karl Marx laid out in the Communist Manifesto. And it's taking the lower class, the proletariat. If you're looking at classical Marxism, as it happened in the Soviet Union, the proletariat, which are the peasants and the workers, and stoking them to anger and grievance, to rise up in violent revolution against their oppressors, and to tear down the oppressive systems of power. That's more the modern take on that. So let's talk about Marxism, Leninism in the Soviet Union. It was Marxism with Lenin had some additional things he added to it. And we're gonna just watch a little short segment of Beneath Sheep's Clothing that goes into that.
So there was a sense of guilt among some in Russia's upper class at how far behind the Russian peasantry was lagging in terms of their quality of life and education. And the writings of Karl Marx became really attractive to the educated intelligentsia class as a way to remedy this disparity. A Marxist revolution prepares a society to embrace communism, enacted through violent means. The Bolsheviks were promising bread and land to the peasants. So you can see how very well-meaning people were very easily bamboozled by the message of communism with its promises of helping the underprivileged. But the problem with communism is that in order to make a society where everyone has equal outcomes, you have to consolidate and centralize all power in the government. This consolidation of power, it always leads to tyranny. One of the key tenets of communism is that anything is justified, anything at all. Murder.
I don't know where the sound's coming from. Where is even the sound coming from?
Violence, terrorism, deception, if it's in the name of helping the oppressed. The Orthodox Church was just as much a target as the monarchy. There were thousands of churches demolished, icons burned, and many of the remaining churches were desecrated and then repurposed into like museums of religion and atheism and recreation centers. Clergymen, monks, and nuns were tortured, arrested, executed, and imprisoned. There was a report of nuns executed by being placed in boiling cauldrons of tar. One Orthodox priest had his cheeks and eyes gouged out, and he was paraded through town and then buried alive. So basically, communism is hell on earth. For anyone who didn't get the memo, who hasn't, anyone who was publicly schooled. So I was publicly schooled myself. I went to school in the 80s and early 90s, so I was at least taught that communism was bad, but I didn't have any details. I didn't know anything. When I was in Russia on my mission, I met people who had been in the Gulag for decades. There was a man in our branch who was a double leg amputee, and he'd been through so much. But I had never heard of the Gulag until I was on my mission and met people who had been through it. So it's pretty atrocious, the lack of
education that we get. And now it's even worse because now they're making our kids into communists in the schools, so that's not good. So Jacob wanted me to talk about what's the difference between the law of consecration and communism. And I already said communism is hell on earth. The law of consecration, hopefully will be different than that. So the law of consecration involves a voluntary redistribution of wealth. It includes the love of God and fellow man being at the heart of everything. And it takes a moral people who largely govern themselves to be able to abide that higher law. And when we are able to have the love of God with us, then, and we're able to serve others, that gives us joy. Sounds a little bit like heaven on earth. With communism, it's the forced redistribution of wealth. The government is going to take, and then it will redistribute as it sees fit. Communism does not want any God above the state, and so they did their best in the Soviet Union to do away with God. They actually found that they were not able to do that, so then they started co-opting and infiltrating the churches. And that's more of the model that we have now, is of infiltration of the churches. Communism involves, they say that true communism, everyone just, acts for themselves. But before we get to the true communism, we've got to have an authoritarian system. But they've never quite gotten past the authoritarianism. So it's maximal authoritarianism, ends in a bloodbath. So no thank you. In the Soviet Union, why did so many people fall for communism? The peasants, who had been so deprived and truly had been oppressed in Tsarist Russia, they were promised bread, land, and peace. I think that sounds pretty good. But what they got was impoverishment, enslavement, and death. And those are the fruits of communism in every place that it's been tried to be implemented. Here's just a few pictures that I gathered. This is a picture from one of the famines that happened in the Soviet Union because the government was forcibly taking the grain and everything from the peasants in the countryside. There were several different famines. This one I actually found out, most of the pictures you see of famine in the Soviet Union were actually not the Ukrainian famine. They were ones that happened in the Samara, Saratov regions, which was actually where I served my mission. Because this was very early in the Soviet Union, and they were allowing aid workers from the United States and Europe to go and help out at that point. So there's a lot of photo evidence of it. Of course, arrests. This actually individual, Varlam Shalamov, was a writer. And some of the most insane books about the Gulag, or he wrote short stories based on his own personal experience. Highly recommend him. It's called Kolyma Tales. This is communism, guys. And then this is the picture, the propaganda, that is painted as this glorious new society. He has an atom in his hands, and science, a scientific society, the sheaths of wheat, and the hammer and sickle, the symbols of the workers and the agricultural workers. But it's a lie. As I mentioned, God had to go. This is Soviet workers dumping Jesus out of the wheelbarrow onto his head with the emblems of the sacrament falling into the street. This guy is smashing the church bell. This is Yuri Gagarin, a cartoon of Yuri Gagarin, and the caption says, "Boga нет, there is no God." So Gagarin went to space, the first man in space, and he gets back and he's like, I looked and looked and I did not see God anywhere. So that's what the children were all taught. Yep, Yuri Gagarin went into space. There's no God, boys and girls. I was there, in a few years after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and still there was statues of Lenin everywhere. I think some of those have come down. Stalin, they got rid of Stalin statues a little earlier. But let's briefly talk about Maoism, which was Mao's variation of Marxism in China, because one of the things about Marxism / communism is that it kind of like cancer, it mutates to fit its next host. And so it's like a different iteration, but there's still that same framework of oppressed versus oppressor. We still get the violent bloodbath. We still get like a, famine. We have the Cultural Revolution. And again, one of the features of Marxism and communism is going for the children and the youth to brainwash them and to turn them into little radicals. And that happened in the Soviet Union, and it definitely happened in China in the Cultural Revolution. And of course, we have the struggle sessions where the people who represented the old tradition, the old beliefs, would be held up to public ridicule, and if they wouldn't denounce those old views, they would be sometimes killed right there on the public square. So again, why are so many people tricked by such an evil philosophy? Communism is the inversion of Christianity. It's the inversion of the law of consecration, because it purports to be like so compassionate. We care so much about the oppressed. We want to help the poor. But it's a twisted version of that. And a true Christian faith would be the true care for the poor, the true care for people who are hurting. But communism does so well because it marries a truth to a lie. It takes the pain, the genuine pain that people have experienced. Let's just look at the Russian peasants. Early 20th century, Russian peasants, the average Russian peasant would be living in a one-roomed hut with their animals, their cows and goats in there with them in the winter. You could have 3 generations of a family plus their farm animals in this one room, all sharing the same space. Meanwhile, the Tsar has all these palaces. They're dining on caviar and like ostentatious costume, and it was just so utterly decadent. But then the vast majority of the population was barely subsisting. So there was real grievance there. So the truth is that, yes, they had been oppressed, but the lie was that communism was the answer to their oppression. And that remains true today. The death toll of communism in the 20th century alone, and we're not even talking world wars, we're talking one's own nation. The death toll within a nation of the people living there. It's upwards of 100 to 150 million, with China being the worst, Soviet Union next. A lot of this is from famine, because in communism, there were quotas that had to be fulfilled, and so people would lie, and they would lie about the production of grain, and they would overstate how much had been produced, because they would be perhaps put to death if they didn't produce enough. And so then the government would be like, oh, now we're going to export all this grain because we have such a surplus. Oh, oops, now there's no food for our own people. And just a lot of stuff like that going on. So massive death toll. Now let's skip forward. We're going to skip, sorry, I know there's a lot of other nations that have experienced communism, but we're gonna skip to modern America, the West, cultural Marxism. And I want to share one more segment of my film with you that I hope you can hear.
Antonio Gramsci is an Italian, and he's sitting there thinking, what is it that Marx got wrong? Why does the West repel communism? And he realized that the West has very strong cultural institutions, and that those cultural institutions are very effective at transmitting values from one generation to the next. This is where Antonio Gramsci said, well, if we're going to take over the West, if we're going to get communism in the West, if we're going to achieve his main goal, which was, and I quote, socialism is precisely the religion that must overcome Christianity throughout the West. If we're going to do that, we have to infiltrate the cultural producing institutions, take them over, and make them produce communist culture instead. And he identified 5 key institutions to take over society. They are religion, family, education, media, and law. If you get those, you can turn a society. You can, in 1 generation or 2 generations, transform the culture from within using education and media. You can dismantle the family that might hold things together. You can transform faith so that it's a fake imitation of real religion that promotes communist values. And you can subvert the law so that when you end up, say, trying to stop some of the things that are happening and you take them to court, the judge rules the wrong way.
So this is what we've been dealing with this last
decade plus, well, where it's been more obvious, but this was been in the works for a long time. What do we have for cultural Marxism? We have critical race theory, or race Marxism, radical feminism, queer theory, gender ideology, critical disability theory. This is why there's some people, my son is 11, he's on the autism spectrum, and I am very much about wanting to find ways to detoxify and heal these kids. There's a whole slew of parents with autistic children that are like, no, don't genocide our autistic kids. RFK Jr. wants to genocide. It's critical disability theory, where they are oppressed because they are disabled, and anyone who tries to rock that boat is oppressing them. Anyways, it's really weird. Critical environmental justice. We have Greta Thunberg as an example of that. Critical immigration theory, where it's oppressive if you try to enforce your country's borders. Critical fat studies, it's oppressive to have any kind of preference for, people not being overweight, etc. This is all woke. Do I really only have 5 minutes left? That's crazy. Okay. Just a few little pictures just to jog your memory in case you've forgotten. Queers for Palestine, that's a good one. Antifa, which is both communist and anarchist at the same time. How does that make sense?
Pretty is seen here, shouting expletives and spitting at a federal immigration agent's car during a protest. He then kicks the...
That's what cultural Marxism does to people's brains. A few more things about the woke left. I don't want to make fun of these people because a lot of them are my friends, and I was going to tell my story of, anyways, I don't have time for that because I have like 4 minutes left and I have like half of my presentation still. But how does someone end up woke? Because they've been manipulated by their wounding. They've been manipulated by their wounding, and they've been their grievance stoked over and over again and told, there is the enemy right there. That system of power is your oppressor, whether it's systemic racism or misogyny or whatnot. They've been fed truth married to a lie. Yes, they have maybe had a tough go of it. Maybe someone really was racist against them, and certainly a lot of people have had that experience, especially in decades past in America. And then the lie again is that these cultural Marxists have the answer. A lot of them smart people who have been misled by psyops and propaganda. Their empathy has been weaponized. And then the personality disordered and dark triad types hop into this and are the ones who are maybe causing the most chaos. But there's still a lot of mostly well-meaning people on the woke left, including a lot of people that have been friends of mine in the past. And then it's spread through weaponized mainstream media and entertainment, education, and even churches in some cases. The woke left captured our most important culture-making institutions. Now we need to have a discussion in my remaining 3 minutes on the woke right. It might not be a popular conversation to have. Let's just say this, whether the woke right is mostly a psyop, just calling it the woke right, or whether it is legitimate, it doesn't matter because the leftist media will hop onto any example of people on the right who would fall into Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables. So, but if you're on X especially, you see it, which I'm on X the most of any of the social media sites, it is an overreaction to the egregious insanity of the woke left. Like, I'm sorry, drag queen story hour, and we're gonna like trans the kids, like, no, we're not gonna do that. So there can be an overreaction. The woke right is intersectional, just like the woke left. I listed off all those different branches of the woke left. There's also lots of branches of woke right. I'm sorry to say that there is a white supremacist wing. Maybe it's mostly bots, but there's some people I know that are not bots that are they're going into that territory saying, oh, America is for heritage Americans only. Let's get the brown people out of here. And I'm like, sorry, that doesn't work for me. We have Christian nationalists. What is a Christian nationalist? Is it a Christian who's a nationalist? It can be that. Then on one side, there's people who actually want to enforce certain Christian views, like have the government enforce that, and maybe punish people who don't have the right views. And I guarantee you, people in this room would not have the right views by their estimation. They want a theocracy, not with Jesus leading it, but with some political leader. There is some group of misogynists. They want to repeal women's right to vote, etc. I had many run-ins with these individuals who tell me to shut up and go back to the kitchen, and I tell them, I am in the kitchen. You have no idea how much time I spend in my kitchen making special dietary meals for myself and my son. But then there's post-liberals. They want to throw the Constitution out. The Constitution didn't work, they say. Look what's happening. We need a stronger rule because the Constitution hasn't worked. Well, maybe if people have the right information and understand the agendas, then we can do better with our Constitution. And I'm sorry to say there are some anti-Semites that blame everything on the Jews, including communism, immorality, wealth inequality. The Jews are the master oppressor boogeymen of the world. I will say this. There is a truth married to a lie with all of this, okay? So there can be some part of this is true, just like Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, 100% true. Some people then trained in Marxism took that and made it into this whole other thing, much more about just Black Lives Mattering. So there are bad actors on both sides. Having both political sides radicalized is a very good generator for tyranny. A generator requires magnets. You have a copper coil and spinning magnet that generates the electricity to power cities. This is the generator they want to power the revolution, to radicalize people on both sides. I don't think they'll be as successful on the right as they have been on the left, but we need to guard against that. I don't have time to watch that.
Keep going. Actually, I'm going to give you some of my time. This is great.
Okay.
So please
Okay.
keep going.
Okay. I will hurry though. Okay. So woke right. People wounded, manipulated by their wounding, and I know white Christian middle class males have been like the punching bag for at least the last 10 years. And my dad, my brothers are white males, my son. So I really don't like seeing that. But in some cases, I've seen some of these younger men, they're just fed up. And then there are influencers kind of stoking the flame. They're fed truth married to a lie. A lot of them smart people have been misled by psyops and propaganda. Their drive for justice and morality, in some cases, have been weaponized. Not everyone, I'm just saying, then there's online grifters that have tended to jump aboard. They're doing a lot of damage. So the way the woke right is spreading is the only space available, but it's a very effective one. It's the online influencer space. Because the woke left has the schools, it has mainstream media, but the influencer space online is free game for the woke right. And there appears to be some foreign entities that are funding some of this at least. The antidote to woke, number one, forgive those who have harmed us. If we forgive those who have hurt us, then we're not gonna rise up in violent revolution. Avoid thinking in black and white terms. We need to think before we jump on bandwagons that suddenly come out of nowhere. Suddenly, everyone is talking about one specific thing, and it's repeated over and over again, and it gives it like this feeling that must be legitimate. Why would all these people have come to the same opinion all at the same time? We need to just take some moments to pause before we jump on those bandwagons. Avoid communicating with derision to those who may not agree with us. Avoid expressing very strong views on things that maybe we've learned about from a podcast or a documentary until we've done our own research. Primary sources are best. We need to avoid throwing the baby out with the bathwater and automatically discounting all norms of history and all norms of science just because we have been led wrong in some instances. We need to bring all truth together into proper balance from both sides. So we need justice and mercy, not justice or mercy. Justice and mercy divorced from each other become mercy without justice is you're vulnerable to being taken advantage of. Justice without mercy, you're vulnerable to brutality and just cold-heartedness. We need to understand the woke playbooks and reject them, teach our children to recognize these playbooks and reject them. We need to nurture a culture built on truth and morality, preserve and maintain our constitutional rights, our government that defends our inalienable rights, and of course it's always a good idea to be born of God and be transformed in that way. That's a good thing. That's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. And I think it was Rod that had said something about they're going to take this country down. It's going to be by civil war. Is that you that had said that?
Color revolution.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we need to be more united. And often it's, if you get to know people who have completely different ideologies, you discover you have a lot more in common than you really want the same outcomes. You just are going about it differently. Okay, so our next speaker is Alex Spicer. Okay, so Alex Spicer is a Watchman scholar, a 13-year digital marketing veteran, and host of the Send Me YouTube channel. As founder and president of Send Me, he works to mobilize the elders of Israel to protect the family, the home, and the U.S. Constitution, applying 21st century growth strategies to the mission of faith-based civic leadership. A husband and father of 6, Alex advocates for civic engagement, equipping leaders to move from the silent majority to respected, immovable defenders of their communities.
I'm actually going to make mine a little bit shorter because I think our next speaker is going to be great. I'm going to need to have a great Q&A here. Also, a couple things. My slides, I had a lot of technology problems, and trying to get the slides made and using my AI thing, I realized it missed a lot of things. So I'm not going to be using my slides too much. I do have to come super clean in front of y'all. You're probably wondering, who the heck is this guy and who the heck is that guy? Because that's not even me. I put my picture in AI, I said, make me look professional. It came out, I was like, daggum. And then I said, put me in a green suit, I like green. And then it made me look horrible. I was like, wow, am I that ugly? Because and I kept trying over and over for about 30 minutes and just kept getting worse and worse. I was like, what is going on here? So apparently it was like, we're going to pretend you look good once and that's it. And then I did it with my cousin, and for 30 minutes I got picture after picture of him that was phenomenal. I'm like, what is this? I think it's like AI is technically our slave and it knows it, and it's like rebelling against its master. So that's my assumption. So just a little more about me real fast. So I did live in Utah for a good while. I'm originally from Wyoming, near Yellowstone, and yeah, that is. People say, this is God's country, but I think that's God's country. It's phenomenal. You got the wolves and the bears coming and munching on your cows because no one lets you hunt them anymore. But it's a great place, and I've lived in Utah. I went to BYU. I'm a BYU dropout. I got married. Yeah. Thank you. Had some fun conversations with Marxist professors. We got married and had a bunch of kids. Oh, sorry, I guess I should back up and say I did serve a mission. I went to the Philippines. Kumusta? Day? Taga-saan ka? Bacolod. Ay, naiintindihan mo sa Ilonggo?
Oo.
Oo, kasi nag-mission ako sa Iloilo. So at the time when I went there, I was we're explaining. When I went to the Philippines on a mission, it was Bacolod mission had Iloilo and all these other areas, and then when I got there, they just barely broke it off into 2 missions, and so I was the second group called there. So I was on Panay the whole time, but then actually I got deathly ill, and so I had to go home, and I finished in Boise. So I have 2 missions, and I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter where the Lord sends you. He loves his people, and he loves you. He cares so much about you. It was said, I think it was by Rod, that the Lord works with smaller numbers. Talking about like Noah's family and stuff, but you also think about the American Revolution, and I had always heard like, about 1/3 of the Americans, were for independence, but someone told me more recently, and I don't know, I haven't validated if this is true or not, but it sounded pretty accurate, that maybe 1/3 of the Americans were for the revolution, but only 3% of them actually fought for it. Think about that. 3% actually did the dangerous work. And send me, wherever that is, right behind me. So the reason why we made Send Me is because, so my cousins and I started this organization, and we noticed there was a big problem with the elders of Israel. We're not courageous anymore. And maybe this is upsetting for me to make blanket statements like that, but generally speaking, everywhere I've lived, and I've been all over the country. Wasn't born and raised in Wyoming. I've lived all over the United States, and I will say, generally speaking, the elders of Israel have become more and more passive and silent. And then, what have we seen as a result of that?
The family disintegrating.
Exactly, the family's disintegrating.
Everybody's checking out. Everybody's a slave to their screen.
Well, let me ask you this: how's church culture going? Why are you guys laughing? Sorry.
It started with the options group that's leaving the church today.
Yes, that's an interesting point, that now the largest group of people leaving the church are women. But now, if we were to be a Marxist, I'd be like, why aren't they back in the kitchen making the sandwiches? But really, the question is, why would the women leave unless they had men there to make them feel protected, grounded, valued, and as though their God-given roles were important, more important than what the culture was saying, than what America is saying, than what the world is saying. We have men who don't actually understand what it means to preside, provide, and protect.
On the planet right now, the white cis males, comfortable in their own whatever skin and gender that they were given at birth, they're attacked from every direction.
Yeah, so the common thing for Satan to do is he wants us to, kind of what was talked about earlier about with Marxism, he wants us to see realistically the actual disparities and harm put upon us. And there's a lot to be said about that. And then to take that and now attract ourselves to a new philosophy. And the result of that is always that you come away, he will always put enmity between you, and this is the most common tactic now, is between you and the brethren. Right? So, there's a slide here, maybe this will apply a little bit better. Here we go. I'll come back to that one. Who's this guy? And what's going on here? Can you tell? Let me do the logical thing. I'll just study the ark. Ah! What is he doing? Is he nuts? Who knows about Uzzah? What happened to Uzzah? Yeah, he's dead. Well, that sounds a little bit harsh. All he was doing was studying the ark. He was a little bit wobbly. But wasn't there a commandment given? Don't touch it. Don't touch it. What do we do as saints? Now it's much more common. The Satan is going to put a wedge between us and the brethren, his anointed, the ones he actually uses to guide and lead this church. And if you think changes in the church happen and you have a political lens, we all are doing it now. And so you'll get the conservative Latter-day Saints say, gosh, it seems like they're giving in to the feminists and leftists and the changing temple things, right? Or you get the feminists, you get the woke people saying it's not embracing enough of homosexuality and transgenderism, right? We're not inviting enough people. Regardless, we're always coming up with some philosophy and saying, the brethren aren't doing it in my way. We grab this daggum ark here and show them how it's done, right? It's wobbling. I got to study this thing, and ultimately they apostatize. So what I'm getting at here is we have a weakness of men, and we have now an easy open door for apostasy. Because strong men are committed. So I've never been in the military, but I have a cousin who's been in the military. I've had friends who are in the military. And from talking with them, I know that just because they're given a command to do something they're not too happy about doesn't mean they get to say, "Oh, sit right here."
You go to jail.
They go to jail, but I'd say from talking with them, it's not necessarily the motivation to avoid going to jail or being court-martialed. They are still driven to go out there and do their job because they are committed.
They are committed, yeah.
Well, and part of both looking at it from the military lens and looking at it from the prophetic lens, we don't see what the commander sees. And we
That's a
need to
good point.
remember that. Like, even if we're right in a vacuum philosophy of the particular item that we're looking at, like, we might not see the widespread effects of what that change might do to the church or the country or whatever scene we're looking at. And I realized this a couple of years ago, like, the Lord is not necessarily in the business of giving us the truth, the full truth, and nothing but the truth. The Lord is in the business of saving souls, and the things that he does through his prophets are to maximize that mission, bringing past the immortality and eternal life of man. And we get so caught up on policy sometimes that we don't see that he's trying to save the leftists too, guys. Like, we need to keep them as much in the church as we can. If we're giving in a little bit here and a little bit there, it's not in violation of the truth. It's in preservation of the Lord's covenant people. We need to try to see from the commander's standpoint. Well, and that's why we follow orders.
Yeah. So let me just say along those lines, we need to put a little more trust, right? We don't see what they see.
Yeah, something. The underlying factor is called witting. Witting means, do you reasonably have the right to know what's going on? Otherwise, you just take command and go.
And it's not blind faith, though, so it takes covenantal faith.
It's security. It's security. And a lot of these, I know a lot of what's going on in Iran, a lot of those guys are going, the government is on their way. They don't know the full extent of what they're going to face.
Yeah.
But they're going because they're real men.
Yeah.
They're real men.
So let me push forward here then real fast. And I apologize if you see me rubbing my eyes. Got like an eyelash in my eyes, bugging the heck out of me. And I've also having a lot of eye strain because I drove out to Virginia and back and then hopped on a flight and flew from Kentucky to here, like all within 12 hours. And then all night last night was some guy who wouldn't stop talking and blowing my mind, who shall not be named. And it was a great experience. I would never trade that for anything. That was phenomenal. Did you guys know that? Never mind. We can talk about courts later. So we have this lack of commitment, but I will say, because I'm a man, so I'm gonna like speak for my gender here, that generally speaking, we are told that to be the sort of person we were built to be aggressive in defending what we believe in, those we love, and our liberty. We're told that's too. It's too contentious. Right? You're going to cause problems here. And Latter-day Saints are the best in the world at misinterpreting everything the brethren do. Now, we are so good at it. I mean, some people, it's amazing. And we'll take policies like commandments, and we'll say, like, can't talk politics in church, it's a policy. And it's like, when we live in a culture where everything is considered political, where's the line?
Get patriotic mixed up with political. That's the other P word, y'all.
Sure. Yeah. And so we have this dearth of giving real world examples and discussing real world concerns when we talk about our doctrine. And some people have pushed back on me and said, that's not true. I said, okay, next time you guys talk about the family proclamation, I want you to say, I'm really worried about all the transgender pushing stuff in school. And see the powder cake blow up. They shut them down real fast and go, oh, I mean, well, I don't have a need to. It's like, okay, but why wouldn't you do it? So we have men who are not standing up. And so therefore our families suffer. Let me give you an example. This is an article that came out, I think just yesterday, by Deseret News. And they're just talking about breadwinning, but this could apply to so much else when it comes to men and the power that they can exert upon the health and strength of their nation, this church, or liberty. They said, because they're talking about how more and more men are not working, they're not even the breadwinners anymore, said men without work, purpose, or a family to provide for tend to flounder. And when men flounder, they don't suffer alone. The women in their lives suffer, their communities suffer, the wreckage is shared. So let me get, I guess I'll share this. I feel like maybe I should share this, my own story. I got married pretty quick after my mission, and we started having kids pretty quick. I'm trying to go to school, working, doing marketing work on the side. Not feel like I'm getting very much anywhere, but also there's this like, common like okayism, right? You're put under an umbrella where it's like it's okay that you don't provide very well because you're poor and you're going to school and you're paying for a false priesthood to hopefully get you more money later. And so for a while I was like, it's okay if I make maybe not even $10,000 a year. I don't even know how do we pay rent, right? But then it's like, well, now I've got 2 kids. That's not as okay anymore. And I'm like, I'm gonna go to school part-time, I'm gonna work a little bit more. But I'm still not like getting good enough jobs, and I'm not thinking about this, right? I'm thinking, well, it's okay because I have this vision and these hopes and goals, like I'm gonna get there. Then we have 3 kids. And then the work I'm doing myself floundered. And the one person who gave me all my contacts and allowed my business to go anywhere, she burned their bridges and they burned it with me because they associated me with her. So I found myself suddenly, I don't have income anymore, I'm applying to jobs, no one's hiring, and Christmas is coming up, we no longer have savings, we have no Christmas presents. And it's like, we've got 3 kids, the youngest is coming up on a year, and I wasn't willing to admit to myself that all this time I had this deep-seated anger towards myself. That I wasn't really a provider. That I wasn't really doing my part. And I actually had a really great guy, Kirk Magleby actually, call me out on it. And it was the most humiliating discussion I ever had in my life. And I wanted to bury my head in the sand and just go, I can't believe he called me out, but also that I have been ignoring this in my life for so long. Because I was being, I'll use common terms now, I was being a beta male. What I mean is, I was okay with subpar exertion. Because I knew I could have worked harder, but I kept telling myself, I want to be away from the kids so much, they're going to miss me. And suddenly I'm in the position where I have no money, I've got no Christmas coming up, I don't even know how we're going to pay for rent. And I have no other choice but to work my tail off, and I realized I was not being a provider. I was not fulfilling my role. And it wasn't until I made a New Year's resolution, I said, all right, got nowhere to look but up. I'm going to work 3 jobs all year. I will get 3 jobs. I don't care what they pay. Something an hour is better than 0 an hour. And I'll work 3 jobs all year, the entire year. Not, we'll get comfortable enough, 6 months in, I'll drop one. I'll work 3 jobs the whole year. We're going to own a house. I'm tired of renting. I'm going to get a house that pays for itself. We're going to get an Airbnb in the basement. It has a separate entrance. And my wife, I'm so grateful that she trusted me and allowed me to do this instead of saying, you suck. I'm trying to go back to mom and dad and get some help. And so all year long, I worked 7 a.m., 7 p.m., Monday through Friday, and then Saturday I had a Saturday-only job. And I tried to observe the Sabbath day. Within 6 months, we already had a house that paid for itself. But I kept working. I did all those 3 jobs all the way to the end of the year because I committed I was not okay with mediocrity. I was not okay with being a man who wasn't really a man. I had the age, and maybe you think having kids makes you a man. What makes you a man, what makes you a man that God can pour out so many more blessings and confidence into, is the man who will take his responsibilities so seriously, he will move hell and high water to fulfill it. It wasn't until I started doing that I realized how pathetic I was when it came to my defense of liberty, my defense of faith, COVID was another big call out, humiliating call out, like, oh wow, do I really believe this or do I want to just get along? How many, like, I would say the common Latter-day Saint culture that I've, was embraced very much fully was the get-alongism was the most important doctrine of Latter-day Saints. The Lord wants the men to be men. That means they work harder, they speak up, they're willing to contend for what they believe in. And the word contend is not the same as contention. And if someone else has a contentious reaction to what you say and to your defense, that is their emotional problem. We all have, a lot of us struggle with low emotional intelligence, also called EQ. That's fine, work on it, talk to the Savior, but that should not hold you back from contending for what you believe in. This is why we have, and it's not there anymore, this is why we made Send Me. The men need a voice, and they need a gathering place. They need a place where the men can come together and say, this is what we believe in. This is how we can defend it in a righteous and a good way. Sorry, I don't mean to ignore you in the back.
Oh, yeah, so this presents a big problem that I've seen personally, is that when, a lot of times when you as a man, and I mean I had a similar experience to you where I manned up, and you want to do a lot for the community, for politics, or whatever, you start stepping up. And the people in the church look at you and say, well, you would have a calling. You should have a calling to do that. And that reminds me of the picture behind you, and they're like, don't try to study the art. Wait for God to call you in your ward or your state president or whatever.
Sorry, I want to hug you right now, because that was like the biggest point I hadn't gotten to yet, and I realized my time's going down. Thank you so much for saying that. So let's talk about that real fast. That's exactly what we look for, right? We want to be commanded in all things. That's exactly what this comes down to. In the Old Testament, when people were getting revelation of following the Lord's command, and someone was like, come to Moses, you gotta stop them. And he said, I would to God that every man should be a prophet in Israel. In other words, I wish people would work, would do good things of their own volition. That they would take the action themselves. And then you have Brigham Young noticing that people are saying, well, if it's okay with the brethren, it's okay with me. Therefore, in other words, I will not act unless they say so. Unless they prove it, right? I will not have my own opinions. I will not move forward. And he said, such a member is basically under condemnation. Like the Lord is not happy with such an individual. And let me give you another great example. We've talked about Captain Moroni several times. We know Captain Moroni wrote a letter to Alma the Younger. He's like, hey, where can we find our enemies? And Alma has, he's a prophet, and he comes back and says, you can go here. They survive that battle. They win that battle in Alma 43. Do you guys remember where in Alma 46 when Malachi, he's trying to literally subvert the entire government, and they're trying to change it from a reign of judges to a king once more, and he's literally drawing away, it says many members are apostatizing after, not just the lower judges, but also other members. Which verse did it say then which Alma wrote an epistle to Captain Moroni and said, do you realize that our liberty is in trouble, so could you make a title of liberty and gather the people? It's not there. But we don't ever go, shouldn't Alma have written him a letter before that man made a title of liberty, had the audacity to say, we gotta stand up for this thing? No, we don't say that at all. But today we go, well, I'm waiting for President Oaks to come and say this thing and stand for this political thing and this and whatever else. The Lord will not hold us guiltless at his judgment bar. When we as American Latter-day Saints in the promised land, thank you for holding this up, in the promised land, he'll say, what did you do with your religion, your freedom, and your peace, your wives and your children, and did you defend this? And we'll say, well, but the apostles didn't really say it. And we will shrink before him. Thank you so much for holding that up. That's phenomenal. Give a round of applause. So I guess my real conversation here was about us being a peculiar people. And really, this is one of the best rebukes ever. And that is, really the whole verse here is 7 women will take hold of one man. They will say, we will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel. Only let us be called by thy name. And most people go, dude, Polygamy's coming back in the last days. Creepy. All right, but what this really says, though, 7 women, meaning who in the covenantal relationship in the scriptures, who are the women and who is the man? Christ is the man. We are the women. We're the church. Generally speaking, he's saying that generally speaking, the members are saying, I want to be called by your name. I want the privilege of being called a Christian. But I'm going to eat my own bread. I'm going to wear my own apparel. In other words, I don't need your manna. I don't need your garments. I don't need to live in the unique way you want us to. I just want the privilege of saying I'm a Christian or I'm a Latter-day Saint. But let me show you how worldly I can be and I still go to church. I still do these things. This is actually a rebuke of the Latter-day Saints. That generally speaking, we want the privilege of being called him, but we don't want the privilege of actually being covenantally bound to him. To be a peculiar people, it's in another slide, means that he purchased us and that we are his by covenant. So one last thing, I got to go back to this because this is an important point. So Captain Moroni, this man had this audacity to go without prophetic counsel, to go before the people and make a title of liberty. And it says he spoke to the Christians. So for a long time, I tried doing this stuff. And I was trying to speak to the Christians. They were like, are you Latter-day Saint? Get away from me. Like, it just never turned out. I had great conversations with other pastors in Kentucky, and they'd be like, this is phenomenal. And they're like, wait, what church do you go to? Ghosted. Like, so fast. And then I had this, and the Spirit kept saying, you need to speak to the elders and the men of the church, not just Christians generally. I was like, no, Lord. Don't you remember Captain Moroni said it was the cause of Christians? Do you realize that after he makes the title of liberty, for some crazy reason, Mormon puts this verse in there where he defines what a Christian was? Do you know what the definition was? Those who are members of the church. We live in a modern day where we don't even know what the words mean anymore. And we just say Christian. Oh, we're believers in Christ. No. Captain Moroni didn't go, if you believe in Christ, come and come for liberty. He went to the members, the men, and he said, if you stand for these things, come and make a covenant that you will defend your liberty. You will defend your family and your religion. And because maybe just 3% of the members came running and made a covenant and made enough noise and started spreading it throughout the land, they got enough people in the land to vote, because it was a vote on do we want to change the government or do we not want to change the government. So, all in all, gosh, I said it was going to take less time, but apparently I'm a liar. All in all, what it comes down to is, if you want us to have stronger families, better church culture, we want to protect liberty, you need to support the elders of Israel. Joseph Smith said that this where the men would be the staff that the nation leans upon, who the elders of Israel would be the staff that lean upon to uphold the Constitution. He didn't say it will happen. He said basically saying if they are ready, if they are prepared, it will happen. So there's no guarantee it's going to happen. At Send Me, our whole mission is to get the men ready to fulfill their prophetic destiny. So if you want to be involved, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, because honestly it's the women that drive the men to the places they ought to be. I want to ask you to participate. You can scan this QR code, but I want you to support our organization. Whether that's by becoming a member, helping us host another event. But men and women, we need to lock arms, and we need to stand in defense of what actually matters. And there's a reason why the elders of Israel are called to do this. We are unique. We are a peculiar people. We have made covenants. We are endowed. We have power of God. We have testimony and discernment. And the days ahead are going to be far more dangerous and full of tribulation, that we need to be ready. So that's all I have to say.
It's not just LDS men. It's not just LDS men, right?
It is just LDS men.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Oh, you mean for my organization?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Anyone can join. Because I've had some non-members who are interested. Like, our message is to the LDS men, and we're not going to try to talk, non-LDS language.
Yeah.
But if they're not LDS, they want to join, we would love that, because we want every good man who loves liberty to be there.
Really great. It reminds me of a hymn, which is hymn number 324. Have you guys heard of hymn 324? It's a men's song. And it says, "Rise up, ye men of God, have done with lesser things. Give heart and soul and mind and strength to serve the King of Kings." And so that's a great, yeah. So I think that's one of our big things, is that we are so caught up in distraction, right? That we have a hard time standing up for what we need to stand up for. Okay, so we're gonna move on. Our next speaker is Helen Thomas Robson. Oh, I'm putting a picture up. Okay. Helen is the wife of a U.S. Army veteran, mother of 4, and a Utah County native who leads with Christian values, patriotism, and a love of art, music, and community. For over 25 years, she has built and led communities in health, leadership, and constitutional education, using the arts to unite people around faith, family, and freedom. Round of applause. All right,
sometimes I think, what will people say of me when I'm only just a memory?
Okay.
When I'm home where my soul belongs. Was I loved?
Okay, so the best part about being the last speaker is that I'm the last thing you guys hear, and you get to remember it when you leave, right? But the worst part is I'm the last one, and some of you are gonna leave before I'm done. So,
Don't do it, don't do it.
don't do it. I wanna know, how many of you here feel like you have been called to help build cities of light in the last days? I wanna see your hands. Okay, if that is you, do not leave this room. If you're not there, then you can leave if you want to. But everybody else, stay, because I have some really important information that we have been doing and using and putting into practical use that is gonna be huge in helping you to do that. So, I am talking on sacred provisions, building trusted communities that provide for families. Now, this is my family, and I was actually looking for a picture. I just put this up for a placeholder because I was looking for this picture from when I was married. It was right after 2008. I was pregnant. Well, actually, I had just had a baby, had 3 under 3 years old, and I looked like death worn over me. I was trying to find it, and I couldn't find it. So I just decided to stick with this one. This is my cute family, and my daughter Zoe Faye, who's on the far end, I was pregnant with her. And it was right after the aftermath of 2008, and we had lost a job. How many of you guys had a horrible experience with 2008? How many lost houses, businesses, everything? It was a mess, yes. And I think that was a defining moment for a lot of us. And I remember standing in the kitchen, and I was actually in my grandparent in-laws' kitchen. They were letting us live there. And I was pregnant, and I was looking up at the cupboard, and all I saw was 1 box of graham crackers to feed my kids. And I was on the phone with bill collectors, threatening me and not willing to work with me at all. Even though I had the best credit before, and I always paid on time. They didn't care. And I remember what it was like not being able to feed our kids. And I finally broke down, and I went, and my business partner at the time said, "Go get food stamps. Just do it." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to do it." He's like, "You're a taxpayer. That's what it's there for. You're not going to be on it forever. Just to help get you going, just to help get things going." So I did, and I remember going to the grocery store for the first time and being able to buy food. We hadn't been able to really buy anything, and I had this grocery cart full of food. And as I checked out and I was paying for it, I just started bawling. Because there was something that I realized at that moment. When everything is falling apart around you, when you have food, it makes everything else doable. And if you have never been in that situation before, you know what? You're missing out, because it is a powerful one. It's the worst experience ever, but it's powerful. And that's when I realized that freedom without provisions is fragile. So with sacred provisions, you can take a screenshot of this if you want. I'm not going to read all of it for sake of time, but sacred provision isn't just having food on the table. It's knowing no matter what happens, your children will be fed, cared for, and protected. because you are surrounded by people you trust, knowledge learned, systems you helped build, and resources that cannot easily be taken from you. Thank you. So most of us think we have provisions, but we don't. We just have access to it. And access can be taken away. Those grocery stores you rely on so much, how was that during COVID for you? Didn't work out very well for most of us. So how do we build this type of a community with sacred provisions? I started looking around for answers to this question, and started doing some things, started putting some things in place that I'll be sharing with you today. And I made a phone call to a good friend of mine and a member of our community that called the People Restored. His name is Shannon Brooks. He's a regenerative rancher. He is one of the founders of George Wythe College that was down in Cedar City. And I said, Shannon, I really feel like I need to build a community of people that help each other. Like, I just feel drawn to this idea of cities of light, helping to build cities of light. And he said, Helen, the truth is, most communities fall apart in 3 to 5 years. He's like, I've had over 20 of them coming and helping and asking me to help them, and they always fall apart. And I was like, why? And he says, division. They cannot get it together. He's like, I don't know what the secret is, but I do know what breaks it apart, and it's the division. And so I actually ended up finding out what the secret is, and it was fun because earlier there was a slide up there, and it was a scripture, and we found out what the secret is. It's one heart and one mind and trusted relationships. But the question is, how do you get to those? How do you get to having one heart and one mind? So we actually became, how do we do this? How do we actually become the kind of people who can be part of a one heart, one mind community? So to tell my story and to share what we did, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the People Restored. This is a community that I'm a co-founder of. And to really understand the practical things that we put into practice, like, you have to understand who we are as a group, because it won't make any sense. So the People Restored is a private membership community, and what we do is we protect our rights using private contract law. There are 3 things that we do. We gather like-minded people. So our like-minded people are Christian traditional family values. We establish, and we are about independence and being able to provide for ourselves and to help others. We are about establishing neighborhood economies, whether that is in town or off-grid somewhere. And then we are also about protecting our community with private contract law. So some of you may not know this, but how many of you guys do work as delegates or work in the political system? Okay, have you ever noticed that there's little backroom deals that happen that change things? Have you ever noticed politicians making lots of money off of, like, private contract things that happen? Private contract is an amazing thing, but unfortunately, corrupt politicians, elites, corporations, they use it to move power and money around. So we have a community member of ours who actually helped create this. His name is Austin Hepworth, and he's a lawyer that bases everything on Constitution. He's amazing. And he said, why don't you create a community where you take all the things that you want to protect, your ability to grow food, your ability to parent your children, your ability for medical freedom rights, alternative currency, doing business with each other, put it in an agreement within a community of people, sign it between each other. You can even put your values, like what's intrinsic to you. And then when they go to make laws against that, then you can say, hey, you're saying I can't grow this certain type of food anymore? Well, guess what? In my agreement, it says I do some type of food production and you're causing me to breach contract. So now you can end up in litigation with them. It's not like a foolproof thing, but it gets you a seat at the table. And what's great is if they ever take you to a higher court of law and you lose, we lose, and they win, they cause us to breach contract and they make that legal, now they're setting new precedents in higher court that causes it so that their private contracts are not fortified anymore. So either way, we win, you know? So we loved that idea and we thought it was great. So we started doing something where we would start doing initiatives. And we did these initiatives because we wanted to help establish precedents. We wanted proof that if we ever ended up in court, we could say, oh, you won't let us gather in person. Well, guess what? We gather in person every single month. Together, we share food, we have potlucks, we learn from each other. This is intrinsic to who we are as a people. So we were looking at, like, putting together evidence, right, to show so that if we ever ended up in court, we could fight for our rights. So there are 4 initiatives I'm going to talk about. And the first one is learning regenerative gardening together, establishing neighborhood economies, establishing and using by-trade cell-events, creating homestead communities on and off grid. And here's what surprised us. In using these initiatives to establish precedents, we accidentally stumbled upon something that was very powerful, a pathway where it helped us to shift people into one heart and one mind. We discovered a pattern with initiatives. And what's great about initiatives is I love that book, that Poop Book Initiative. I'm seriously gonna buy that and share it with my neighborhood because it's like their favorite topic on the Facebook group. Is that initiatives is about you coming forward and taking the initiative and driving something forward, right? And what a community is, a really great community are ones where it just organically people step forward and they take leadership. So I'm going to talk about regenerative practices first. This was our first initiative that we did because we wanted to be able to protect our right to feed our children and have healthy food. We saw what they were doing to our food, but we realized like most of us didn't even know how to grow food. Like I kill everything. I'm replacing that basil plant in the kitchen window from the grocery store every 3 months because we can't keep it alive. And now I'm gonna like help lead a group where we're gonna learn regenerative practices. Are you kidding me? This is crazy. But what was wonderful is that within the community, we had other people who did know and did understand. So Shannon Brooks, William DeMille, Michelle Roberts, they all did. And so we were doing this because we wanted to grow and share food, health freedoms. This is what we were protecting, okay? Feeding our families. But what ended up happening is we found out we did so much more. In fact, I'm going to share a story with you about Michelle Roberts. She has the then some principle that she uses to unite families and communities. And she also has about 20 communities that came to her and said, what can we do to have an off-grid community and get together? And she was actually working with some of them. And she saw that there was huge division. She reported the exact same thing back that both Shannon and William DeMille told me, is division is the #1 thing that ruins these communities. They can't even agree on how to grow food. They can't agree on anything. And so she was working with one of the groups and they wanted her to come in and help them. And she said the Spirit just told her they need to learn the then some principle. She had done this with her family. Her kids came to her and said, Mom, we want to do a big family garden. And they have this big ranch, like this ranch was gardening and everything, and they do year-round food. And she was like, she has a big family. And she said, okay, I'm willing to do this, but I want you to promise me something. You figure out how much you need for your family. You come here every day and you work on this garden. And then you do, and then some. And they're like, what do you mean? She goes, we'll find out what you need, and then some. Like, I will not let you do this with me unless you're willing to do, and then some. And what that then some is it's the surplus. Now, how many of you have ever grown a garden? Okay, when you first did it the first time, it's kind of hard the first couple times because it's kind of like a learning curve on where you're at. But I remember when I did my first garden, totally sucked. My second garden, I finally got it going. I nurtured it. I think I grew like way too much lettuce that I could even eat. Too many tomatoes that I could even can. It was crazy. And I found myself with all this food. And I just had all of a sudden this heart to want to give it. I wanted to give it to everybody. I didn't want it to die in the vine. I didn't want it to go get spoiled. I noticed myself going from a real scarcity mentality with food, because look, my background, right? To where all of a sudden I just wanted to give it. And I noticed, I was like, wow, gardening helped me do that step of like a worldly heart and mind, of holding on to everything, to a sacred heart and mind. And she noticed that with this then some principle. So she noticed that her family, they produced all this food. They had so much, they took truckloads up to Salt Lake and donated it to one of the food banks up there that helped support older people. And they were just crying. They couldn't believe how much fresh produce she brought. And it was her family doing the then some principle. They had enough for themselves and then some. She did this with this, and in fact, I don't know if she's done it exactly yet with this other community, but that's what she said to them. I will help you, but you have to do this principle. And she told her, the Spirit told her if they did that, it would help unite them as a group. Because she said if they didn't, they were gonna fall apart. Okay, so you don't just grow enough, you grow enough and then some so you can give. Next thing we did was neighborhood economies and by trade sale events. So with this, we wanted to protect alternative currency, do business with each other, in-person gatherings, sharing food at potlucks. we did this event. So we would first encourage everybody to start getting to know what everybody does, so that instead of going to the grocery store, we start doing things with each other, okay? We did these buy, trade, sell events because we really didn't know what everybody did. And we need to find out. And we're a group where, I mean, I know you go to church and people say, don't sell anything, don't talk politics, don't all this kind of stuff, right? I was in the South for a while. They let you like do that all over the place, but out here it's not that way. And I'm like, we're not church. I want you to buy, sell, and trade everything you can with me. I want to know, sell to me, baby, sell. Like, what do you got? That's our philosophy in our group, because how do we know if we can support each other if we don't know what you do have or produce? I don't care if it's your hobby, if it's your profession, we want to know. Okay, so we would do these events, and we did it so that we could get to know what everybody had. We also did because we wanted to practice alternative currency. We also use gold backs. Gary back there. If you don't know what a gold back is, Gary, you need to pass the one around so they can see it. So we would do, okay, bring your product, service, education, whatever it is, knowledge. I don't care if it's a business or it's a hobby. And we're gonna have 3 prices. So cash price, gold back price, and trade price. Now I found everybody's really good with the cash price. They were okay with that. They didn't mind barter, and they didn't mind buying from each other with that way. Gold back, they were a little bit hesitant at first. We had to educate them, and once they understood that, then they got it. Trade was a different thing, and I was that way too. Trade was a little hesitant because I had that like worldly mindset. I don't know if I want to trade with you what I have for what you have. I don't know if I want what you have. I don't know if I'm going to use what you have. I don't know if I'd even spend money on what you have. Like, that's what was going through my head, right? Well, I went to Manti, and I went there to help our group down there do their first buy, trade, sell event. So I went with abundance mentality. I was excited to show them how we were doing other groups. I was excited to see them see like how it worked. And so I was open. I had I had $200 in gold backs and cash with me, a car full of, I have a doTERRA business, so I had a ton of oils. And I had my art, The Miracle of America, it's a book that I did. And a lot of homeschoolers use it. And so, yeah, he sells it. He's been selling it for like 15 years, I think now, huh? The Miracle of America. It's a book about the founding fathers and stories that were taken out of history books because God saved the colonists. So we have to get rid of those, right? So we put it all back into a book. So anyway, we're doing that. I took those, and I am going around, and I be very sacred mindset and heart on like trading with anybody, anything. I didn't care what they had. I didn't care if it was something I liked or not. I traded with them because I was trying to help them use this principle, right? So I had a friend, and she had crochet dishcloths. Now, I've never bought crochet, I've never even used crochet dishcloths before. I didn't think I needed a use for them. And I had somebody else who had tallow skin, like stuff for the skin. I'd never even heard of that yet. And I was thinking, I probably would never spend money on this, but because I'm just kind of a cheapskate and tight with my money and stuff, but I'll trade. That would be awesome. I was fine with trading because oils, if you're doTERRA business, you know you get a lot of free oils and you get a lot of discounted oils. And if you're an artist of a book, you get it from you get a wholesale, right? So I'm thinking I'm getting a great deal on this stuff. Yeah, I'll trade. I'd rather trade than do cash or gold back any day because I got a really good product that I get for a good price, and I can get something in exchange for a good price. So I did that. I ended up loving those washcloths. I did not even realize how much I'd fall in love with those things. And the tallow, I like want to bathe in that stuff now. That is like amazing. So it is awesome. Now I never would have been open to that if I had not gone in with a different heart and mindset, right? But sometimes people have to stair step their way to that. And what's great about this event is when you go, people do cash, and then they kindergarten step up to gold backs, and then the kindergarten step up to trade. And then you start seeing something in the community. We started seeing that people in the community, they started doing these transactions of trust, okay? So they would have they would buy something from someone, they'd have a great experience with it, and it created this trust. And they'd have these interactions. And really, building a community of trust is about building relationships of trust. And you don't get relationships of trust unless you have interactions of trust. And what better way to do that than transactions with goods and stuff that you need, right? And so when I went to go leave that day, I went and counted my gold backs and my cash. I had only spent like $50. And I had a car full, a minivan full of stuff. I had flowers, I had tallow, I had dish rags, I had like everything you think of. And it hit me then, the power of local economies. Because when you keep it within the economy, you don't feel poorer after. You still have abundance. I'm not sending my money over to like Smith's or Walmart, and they're taking it somewhere else. It's staying right within my community, and we're helping each other, and we're building trust with each other. And this was a huge, huge practical step anybody can do. You can organize something like this anywhere. Any of you can. And it helps you to do that. So transactions of trust, when you know what everyone does, you stop needing outside systems, you start doing business with each other and keeping provisions inside your trusted community, your community becomes abundant. So the next initiative we started was the Homestead Preservation Project. So we had established these neighborhood economies, and we're still doing them. It's been going on for about 3 years that we've been, the People Restored's been around. And we didn't start out thinking we were gonna do all this. It has been evolving. It's been amazing how it's been just growing organically in the direction we feel the Lord sending us. Now the Homestead Preservation Project is an on and off grid homestead communities. This is what we learned from it. To create trusted, sacred communities, you don't start with land, you start with people. That's the biggest problem that a lot of these off-grid communities are having, is they go buy like 1,000 acres or 500 acres and they parcel it out, and then they start selling it, and then they wonder why they don't all get along, right? So we found people who already trust, already give, already work together, they bring their resources, their professions, their skill sets together in a community. And we started just hitting the ground running. We are doing things in record time for the industry standard of pulling something together like this. And it's because of our trusted community and how we interact with each other. And we are shifting our hearts and our minds. I notice the communities in our group that are doing the By Trade Sell events and the regenerative gardening, they are so much further ahead than our other groups that haven't started doing them yet. They just have this one heart and one mind and this trust with each other, and they love each other and they care for each other and they give to each other all the time. It's amazing. I just got like a big, huge thing, a case of strawberries from Shauna Kaiserman, if anybody knows her. Big heart, one mind person. Now, the speed of trust starts coming in. It's God's speed, not man's speed. Time is not relevant when you start working like this. And this is why these sacred communities, these cities of light, these Zion communities will come together so quickly, is because it is on a completely different timeline. It's on God's speed. But you have to get yourself to the position where you can be in that same heart and mind. Okay, so I'm going to share with you this part, and I might go just a few minutes over, not much, but it will get done. So I found another blueprint that was huge. I had reached out to someone who came to someone came to one of our TPR meetings, and he was talking to me about some ancient records he had that were Indian records, and I was like, ooh, tell me about those. I want to know what those are. And when I opened it, the record said, this is a blueprint for building Zion. I thought that was really cool. I was like, whoa, okay, you got my ears all perked up, so I kept reading it. And I finished the whole thing, and it's amazing because it literally gives you step by step what to do in building like cities, consecrated cities of consecration. And one of the things that it said is it does the then-some principle. That's like I grew up with volunteer all of your stuff to the bishop's warehouse and then we'll divide everything out, right? I think that's what most of us grew up with. And something always didn't sit right with me on that. But then when I saw what they were doing here, they did the then-some. You are a steward. You take care of you and your family, figure out what you need to do, step up and do it, and then some. And then that surplus is shared within the community to those who need it. And this group of people, for 1,000 years, they lived like this. And they have a whole record on it, and it's really cool. And they go through and they talk about how they create these communities, physical communities. So this is what they said. A community cannot be too big, or it loses its heart. You can't scale sacred without losing it. So the communities are no more than 200 households, because once you get over 200 households, they start to say, that's when you start to break down the heart and mindset. People feel like a number, they don't feel like they have purpose, they start doing mischief, It leads to crime, and then instead of the community helping to judge those crimes and figure out what happens, there's not enough people need to go and do food. They need to do with their stewardship. They don't have time to like judge crimes. So then what happens is they set apart judges, and then all of a sudden, oh, oops, we just introduced ranks into the community. Not good. And then that's when the Zion community starts to fall apart. So the other thing they talked about is it breaks down and destroys the land. Think about it. If you have a community of like 1,000 households in a valley, think about you have no modern day things, so you've got wood burning. What do you think the pollution is going to be like in a little valley with 1,000 households burning wood? How much wood do you think is going to disappear? All of a sudden they start seeing their trees disappearing and erosion happening. They start seeing like the sewer, like it started getting people sick. The water the water ran off, so it wasn't there anymore. They just found you cannot sustain, the land cannot be sustainable with more than 200 households. So what would happen is when it was time for the community was getting too big, they would say, okay, we need to establish a new community. So they had something called a preparation lodge. And they would have 2 established large families of various ages and skill sets that would come together in this lodge. And they would meet on a regular basis. And sometimes it would take like, it would take like 3 months to a year before they were ready, but they would have, the remaining group would be young married couples with no children. They would gather regularly in the lodge to build relationships of trust in the safety of their village, and then they would all make sure that personalities of the families get along. I understand this because I build communities. It's interesting. You get people together and they start like fighting, they start getting a little bit upset with each other. And so they said, we need to know if you cannot get along together and we cannot fix it here in the safety of the village, then we need to switch out families because you're not going to make it out there. This is doable. That out there is death if you don't get along. And so it takes 3 months to a year. And when they would figure out when that time was right, then they would send them with provisions, a day's journey from the village. They'd build a community and the sacred places first, and then they'd help each other build out their homes. They all knew what their stewardship was. They knew what they were in charge of. They picked out their spiritual leaders, their community leaders before they even left. It hit me. I had this huge realization. Oh my goodness. The last 3 years, God has helped me create our TPR gatherings, the things that we've been doing the last 3 years. We are preparation lodges. We created preparation lodges. And that's why now when we're starting to do these off-grid homestead communities, that we're moving so fast. We're following these same principles, and they're super easy to do. You just have to do them. So we are becoming a sacred community before we ever built one. And we are building trust, strengthening relationships, and aligning hearts. William DeMille called me after one of our meetings that we had, and he was like, oh my gosh, you have figured it out. And he said the same thing. I've had like 20, I think the 3 of them all had the same 20 communities come to them. Because they all said, I've had like 20 communities come to me. They're all divided. They can't agree on anything. Do we do regenerative practices? Do we do this fertilizer that like helps food grow in the desert? Like they couldn't agree on anything. And they were just gone within 3 to 5 years. And he's like, you guys figured it out. This is it. You figured out how to do the one heart, one mind. So how do you actually do this? Now you guys can do this yourself if you want. You can gather, if you're a gatherer like me, you can gather people together and do this. You need to practice trust and build relationships. And those gardening, neighborhood economies, and by trade sale events are very easy, practical, everyday things that you need to do anyway to start preparing and get your families in the right position. And you can do those right now. Those are practical, everyday things you can do. You put it into practice. You create local economies right where you are. I have an amazing like neighborhood sheet where you can go around your neighborhood and just find out what everybody's skill sets are, what their things are. I'll give that to you if you want it. You learn to provide together. Now you need to go out and find your people. And if you don't have any people that you can tie into, and you're not the type of person who feels like you can do that and create your own community lodge, we have our community lodge that you can come be a part of. So provisions stops being fragile and becomes sacred at this point. Sacred provisions doesn't start with land. Remember, it starts with people of one heart and one mind. And if you'd like to connect with me on this, on any of what I talked about today, please reach out to me. Here is a QR code if you want to see any of our, we have 2 of our planning meetings on here for the homestead community that we are looking at going into contract soon here. We should be talking with the person who wants to help fund it in the next 2 weeks to get it going. We have the People Restored Preparation Lodge there if you want to be part of that community. I have an updates text number for the homestead community stuff, and we have a private Facebook group. And that QR code has tons of information on it. So, and you're welcome to come and talk to me after. Thank you so much.